Today, Donald Trump turned his executive orders on crime and public safety, both here and across the border inside Mexico. There's 3 executive orders that we're going to be breaking down on the show today. But first, here is our president signing these orders.
Respect to the transnational criminal organization and preventing international trafficking. Urge accepted. Thank you. Task Force on Crime Reduction and Public Safety. Preventing violence against federal, state, tribal, and local law enforcement officials. Very important. All very important.
I didn't realize at first, but you know what that was that we just saw there? It was 2 things. One, that's the first time he's seen those.
No, that's exactly right. I was going to ask you, does it seem like
Trump
it was the first time he read those?
Executive action. Because you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of when I'm in the office every time I get a new car. And it's like, yes, this is very important, and I agree. All very important. He's never seen those things before.
Yeah, exactly.
But I am going to largely say that based on my reading, I've read all 3 of the executive orders, they are not as insane, at least at first glance, as other things that he's done as president. So we're going to break down the executive orders, and especially areas where I do have some concerns. But so far, considering this is an area where he said a lot of scary things during the campaign, I don't find them to be all that ridiculous. What might come out of them could be, but so far it's not. This is not the scariest day under Trump.
Okay, great. So you're going to break it down. Before you do so, though, I just want to note for the record that 2 stocks did very, very well today, and those stocks include CoreCivic, which used to be Corrections Corporation of America, a private prison, and also Geo Group, the second largest for-profit prison organization or corporation here in the United States. So the markets have reacted to this news, and that reaction should essentially give you a sign that more people, or at least there's a prediction that more people are going to get locked up.
Yeah, and that we knew a couple weeks ago that we should have invested in these private prisons and chose not to. We're sticking by our principles and our poverty.
That's like
and
one
now
of the
even more
hardest
reason not to.
It's not hard. It's not hard. But working in this business and knowing what someone like Trump is likely to do, you can pretty much predict what's going to happen in the market.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if we had no morals, then yeah, we would totally invest in private prisons.
Yeah.
But I just can't do it.
So let's talk briefly about these executive orders. We've got Presidential Executive Order on Crime Reduction and Public Safety, which largely, all 3 of these effectively set up advisory boards that are going to do investigations into areas of crime reduction, specifically crime reduction against law enforcement officers, and then transnational criminal organizations and human trafficking organizations. Those are roughly the 3. And so these set up groups that are going to look into these issues. They're going to consult with law enforcement officials from around the country, nonprofits, all that stuff. And then they're going to begin putting out reports on what they find, and they're going to put together suggestions for the president on policies that he can pursue in those areas. Now, all 3 of those areas are, at least at first blush, yeah, we want crime to be reduced. Now, it has been going down for decades. He doesn't acknowledge that. We do. But both of us want crime to go down. We don't want a single law enforcement officer being killed on the line of duty. And then transnational criminal organizations like drug traffickers and those who do human trafficking, we want those to be disrupted as well. And so the mission here, at least as it's stated, is not a bad thing. But in each of these, I found a section or 2 that is a little bit concerning. First of all, when it comes to the crime reduction and public safety, the way that it's being framed is a little bit disingenuous and a little bit manipulative. It starts off by saying many communities across the nation are suffering from high rates of violent crime, which is sort of true. There are certainly some areas, although, as I've said, they've been going down for decades. A focus on law and order and the safety and security of the American people requires a commitment to enforcing the law and developing policies that comprehensively address. They have 3 areas they talk about: illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and violent crime. Now, those are the 3 threats to public safety that they talk about. Now, look, violent crime is a bad thing. Now, yes, between 1994 and 2014, the FBI says that it went down by about 49%. Still important, still needs to be reduced. But to say that illegal immigration and drug trafficking are two of the three biggest threats to public safety is just not backed up by the data, and it's used to scare people. You should be scared of immigrants. You should be scared of drugs coming in. Those could be bad things, theoretically, certainly in particular cases, but those are not the biggest threats facing our country.
What do you believe are the biggest threats facing our country?
I would say probably the guns. I mean, 30,000 people plus.
And they're planning on rolling back whatever few regulations, federal regulations we have in regard to guns. But
Exactly. So the sheer amount of guns out there leads to tens of thousands of people being killed. I would say in terms of deaths, now this isn't really crime because these things have been legalized, the sale of these things, but I would say flooding of narcotics and opioids out into the market, fully legally. It's not a crime, but in a lot of cases I think it probably should be. That's the sort of drug problems that I think we have that certainly kills a lot of people. And I would say probably provocations with Iran is probably going to be pretty scary coming up soon. But I do say, look, if you want to do something about violent crime, that's perfectly fine. But giving this idea that illegal immigrants are one of the chief sources of violence in our country, that is not true.
Yes, so we actually spoke about so-called sanctuary cities and the level of crime in those cities versus crime in other major metropolitan areas. And so for those of you who might not know what sanctuary cities are, they're essentially cities where lawmakers do not plan on making law enforcement go after individuals who might be undocumented. They're kind of like safe havens for people who do not have documentation to be here. And so Donald Trump keeps pushing this narrative that, oh my God, these are crime-ridden areas. But that's actually not the case. FBI data indicates that these sanctuary cities, on average, tend to be a little safer than other major cities that are not sanctuary cities. And in some cases, it's the same level of crime. And so it's fear-mongering, and I agree with you that undocumented immigrants making the country less safe is ridiculous. Drug trafficking is interesting, but he's primarily focusing on illegal drug trafficking. We need to kind of hone in on what's going on with our pharmaceutical industry and the cozy ties that it has with doctors and the reason why a lot of doctors overprescribe things like opioids. That's a problem. I don't know if he's looking into that. And then finally, you know, the heroin epidemic. You're not going to clean up the heroin epidemic unless you provide these individuals with real rehabilitation and you provide them with a way of weaning themselves off this drug, right? And I'm curious to see how he plans on tackling that, if he tackles that at all. But yeah, that's an issue that I think you need a more progressive approach in, and I just don't think he has it in him to do that.
Yeah, I would probably add, now this isn't by the numbers one of the biggest, but we've done a great job over the last few decades of getting deaths from violent crime, murders and things like that to go down. That we deserve a lot of credit for that as a country, but we haven't been able to get the rate at which our police officers are killing civilians, and especially unarmed civilians, down to the same level that they are at in other Western nations. I think we could perhaps put a little bit of work into getting those numbers down. And also the various things, now this is one of the ones that you don't get to point at a minority and say they're the cause of it, but the things that companies are allowed to pump into our environment and into our bodies, I think that those things are huge threats to public safety. They just don't come at the barrel of a gun. But the things that we're allowed to put into the water, into the air, into our food, the sorts of things that people are allowed to consume that lead to like 9 out of the 10 causes of death that are most common, I think those are huge threats to public safety. They're just not really sexy ones, okay? They don't come at you with a knife.
So
you come at them with a fork, actually.
A story that we will do later on in the show today has to do with lead levels in some schools in the Bronx. And if you think lead levels in Flint, Michigan were concerning, in this case, in New York, in the Bronx, it's much higher. And so that has to do with our crumbling infrastructure and the fact that a lot of these schools rely on extremely old pipes. So you're absolutely right. If we're genuinely concerned about public health and public safety, these are issues that we need to tackle. But a lot of his emphasis is on the types of things that I believe misinformed Americans are scared about, right? And so, again, you look at the trend in America regarding violent crime, and it's been going down year after year. And I think it's important to protect cops, don't get me wrong, right? And there were a number of horrendous, tragic situations where a number of cops were ambushed and killed. And so, yeah, you want to protect them. I totally understand that. But also understand that in emphasizing protecting the cops, he is making a strong statement against what a lot of Americans have been concerned about, and that's excessive police force and the police state that we're living in.
Yeah.
It's a response to movements like Black Lives Matter, and it's essentially a middle finger to them to say, no, I'm not concerned about you, I'm concerned about the cops.
So let's turn to that, the second of the 3 executive orders, the preventing violence against federal, state, tribal, and local law enforcement officers. So here's an area where you can perhaps get a little bit worried, not at trying to protect cops, but the way that they're going to do it. One section says we're going to pursue appropriate legislation consistent with blah, 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 that will define new federal crimes and increase penalties for existing federal crimes in order to prevent violence against those groups. And so what they're saying there is these like blue protection laws, they're against hate crime legislation, but they are for the exact same thing for cops, that if you target a police officer, there should be special penalties for you. They're going to create new legislation. They're going to strengthen that which already exists to protect this group, because that's the group that they at least want to seem like they are doing what's in the best interest of them. There's a little bit more.
That's a good way of showing the American people that all lives matter.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's also a great way of convincing cops that they're in more danger than they're actually in, and we'll have those numbers for you in just a second. Also, there's another section which talks about changes to grant funding based on the evaluation required by blah, 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 including, these are by the way, I'm culling these out of long sections of this. But what they're saying there is that if particular areas theoretically aren't doing what they consider to be necessary to protect police officers or other law enforcement officers, then grant funding could be affected. We had that with the schools, with the protests that went on. And now, you know, if you're not doing what's necessary to control illegal immigrants or something like that, maybe some of the funding needs to be taken away from you. Or if police departments aren't doing what we would like, maybe some of their funding gets taken away. But the whole point of this is to tell cops that they're under more threat than they're actually in historically, and to tell people that the cops are being targeted and killed in numbers we've never seen before. Now, any cop's death is a tragedy, but it's simply not historically accurate to say that they're in more danger than they've ever been in before. If you can bring up this chart, you're going to see historic on-duty deaths of police officers. Look, between around 125, 130 cops died back in 2014. But those numbers have also been trending down. There can be occasional spikes that'll go up, but largely they've been trending down for the past 5 decades.
Wow, take a look at the 70s.
Exactly.
Wow.
And even then, I mean, look, 300 cops, close to that. That's a lot of cops dying on the job. But there are also literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of cops.
Yeah.
And so we should focus on this. We should care about this. Try to get that number down as far as we can. But we can't pretend that that's the biggest threat facing our country. And there's also the last executive order has to do with these transnational criminal organizations, drug traffickers, those who do human trafficking. Look, if they actually do a lot to cut down on human trafficking, that's amazing. That can be one of the best things that the Trump administration can possibly work on. But it's also possible in some of the sections, they talk about laws from around the country that might hinder efforts to fight drug traffickers and things like that. Now, could that theoretically be used as a pretext to shut down dispensaries, to change state-level laws that have to do with drugs if they feel like that's cutting into their efforts? We don't know, and it might take up to a year to know.
That would be crazy, by the way, because, I mean, we all know that people had been smoking marijuana in this country way before dispensaries were around, way before it was legalized in various states. They're going to smoke marijuana anyway. In fact, you get rid of the legalized way of getting it, they're going to get it illegally, which only, you know, empowers cartels and drug traffickers. But one other quick thing I wanted to add, not about drug trafficking, but human trafficking. It really depends on what they mean when they say human trafficking. So if they're going to go after individuals who are trafficking people, let's say in the sex trade or whatever, and they didn't consent, they don't want to be in it, they were forced into it, I'm all for that. But I'm worried that this is more a focus on prostitution.
It could be.
And,
That's possible, yeah.
and in that case, it would only add insult to injury for, you know, some women who and men who work in the sex work industry. So
That's true.
Look, I guess we'll see how this is all going to play out. And
yeah.
it could be good, it could be bad. Just like with Trump, everything is a wild card. We don't know.
Yeah, and look, I don't expect that there will be any recognition of this. People say that we simply respond to everything he does as saying that there's an emergency. This doesn't seem like the end of the world. We're trying to be fair to, I was going to say to him, I'm trying to be fair to whoever it is that wrote those executive orders that he just read very briefly before signing it.
Right.
That person doesn't seem to be the craziest person in
by
the
the
world,
way,
at least in this area.
Let me be very honest and clear about something. I don't care about being fair to him. I care about being accurate for the audience, okay? So
I don't care as much about that.
I have no interest in fear-mongering about Donald Trump. I think that there are potential positives from Trump, TPP, the possibility of him criticizing Israel over some of the settlements that they're planning on building, that kind of stuff. But still, we're not entirely sure how those things are going to play out. I just want to make sure you guys know the facts, and then you can decide for yourselves whether or not you think these policies are good.
Are you sick of the mainstream media? Then I got good news for you. We're going to hire some investigative reporters, and we're going to go house. We're actually going to investigate what's happening in this country and stand up for you guys. Help us do it. Go to tytnetwork.com/go. If everybody watching this video just gives a little bit of money, we'd have plenty to hire those investigative teams and unleash them on the country.